Good afternoon, blog viewers. Just make sure the video is working. It is wonderful. And today, given that it is the summertime now, it is getting warm out here in Southern California, and since the summer tends to be a happy time for people, I'd like to talk about happiness today. I think Harold Bloom once divided many writers into either summer writers or winter writers. Summer writers being stressing the positive, being more joyous and light, and winter writers being more negative and dark. And of course, as we've already stated on the blog, there's a time and a place for both of those viewpoints of human life. Neither can be exaggerated, but neither can be ignored in not only understanding the world, but in coming up with a human personality that is coherent and does justice to what any individual human being experiences over the course of a human life. But today, we'd like to talk about happiness. Let me just check the video again. And now, of course, happiness and a life of joy are, of course, things that everyone wishes for. And of course, Aristotle, in his Ethics, said that the point of, or the thing that everyone really goes for in the end, the thing that all other actions strive toward, is human happiness. And it's important to note here that when Aristotle talked about happiness, he was talking not about happiness as a mood. And I think in our day and age, we talk much more about happy moods, and those can come and go, as everyone knows. Things can delight us very quickly, but I think both Plato and Aristotle and many other philosophers, when they talked about happiness or joy, they were talking about a life that was happy and a life that was joyous over the course of many, many years. And moods do not typically last that long. A mood comes and goes with whatever event that was causing the mood. Not that moods are bad, or that being in a happy mood is at all something to be looked down upon. It's quite a good thing. But what is more important is finding a form of life and a form of existence that can produce a more stable, flowing, continuous form of happiness. And that is one thing that we will continue focusing on in the blog, or writers who have certain ideas about how it is that man can attain any such thing. Now, again, going back to, because I think this is such a critical distinction, distinguishing, as Aristotle and Plato and some of the other ancients did, between happy moods and happiness as a state of existence. We can all think about moments in our life where we were elated, certain joys we had, certain pleasures that gave us happiness, certain honors or distinctions that we were very proud to earn that gave us some level of happiness, things that we purchased, new items, new toys, new gadgets, new dresses or clothes, new shoes, all of those things. No one can hardly deny that those things can put us in some sort of level of happy mood for a while. But the question is that it? Beautiful suns. Again, we go on with listing more examples: a beautiful day, a beautiful sunset, a beautiful song. All of these things can put you in a happy mood. But even though we've all experienced those things, I would say most people that I know, or that in general, most people do not attain stable levels of happiness in the sense that we are discussing, some sort of happiness that is continuous and is not so dependent on the good things we talked about to produce itself. Does not continually need these sorts of things to continue to produce happy moods. It can exist continuously. And I'd say most people, even though by age 25 or 30 or 35, 40, even beyond that, have attained a lot of these joyous moods. Most people, I don't think, have attained any sort of stable level of happiness, and that is something that I think it's worth our time on the blog to focus on any ideas that promise that, and see to first what they say, and second to test them out and see if that is if their ideas are any good, if they do indeed bring any sort of stable, lasting contentment, or if they're just a bunch of words thrown together by someone that it was adept at stringing words together, but is not actually communicating truths. And so, of course, one thinker that had many ideas on happiness was Plato. Not in the sense of again happy moods, but he certainly had ideas of what a good life consisted of. He uses in a lot of his dialogues, he talks about a supremely fine and good life that a man can live. The most fine and good and blessed, supremely happy is another phrase he uses. Those phrases are throughout justice, just, and all of those ideas. I think Plato, in some way or another, was referring to a level of existence that was continuously serene, continuously, in some sense, content, continuously flourishing, continuously perfecting itself. And in the end, whether all those things were happiness, each person has to judge. But I think Plato came to the view over time in many of his dialogues that combination of continuous states was sort of the best that a human being could ever achieve. And that is sort of an important point here too. I think thinking about happiness in terms of a human life and so much of what is outside of one's control. There's many things that people just cannot control, the limitations of being human. There is some level that I just think it's probably impossible to go beyond, and we probably wouldn't want to go beyond if we were human. So Plato is careful in the dialogues to talk about a level of happiness that is the best available for a human being, even though that may be much more than what we normally would imagine right now, but he still does locate it within a human life. And in one dialogue I think I want to look at today, it's called the Timaeus, and it is about 70, 80 pages. It is one of the finest dialogues I've read of Plato's so far. It is, I think, John Cooper, who wrote the edition that I'm looking at, the Plato Complete Works, describes it as a rhetorical display, not a philosophical dialogue, filled with grandiose and rhetorically elaborate cosmic theorizing, not the down-to-earth dialectical investigation of most of Plato's philosophical works. And indeed, the Timaeus has many, many passages that literally just fly, where the language flies and seems to just be sort of a summit level of summit type, peak-like sort of philosophical discussion and theorizing that is really, I think, is pretty hard to match and hard to duplicate in many other philosophical works. But the Timaeus is in general, that's some words on its style, but the dialogue is in general not really a dialogue. In fact, it's a speech by the main speaker, and this main speaker, after Socrates talks for a little bit, is obviously Timaeus. And Timaeus is in the dialogue. Socrates, Critias, and Timaeus are gathered around, and again, this view is taken that what is best for three people of their age and their station in life is to gather around and give speeches to each other. And it's described here as at 20c, your speeches are your hospitality gifts, and so here I am, all dressed up for the occasion. No one could be more prepared to receive your gifts than I. That's Socrates speaking there. So human thought, human speech, human wisdom of the sort that we find in the Timaeus is described here as ultimately one of the best gifts that another human being can give to another. The gift of reason, the gift of eloquent speech, the gift of reasoned speech. All of those things Plato, I think, viewed as one of the best things that we could give to each other. Again, not that other things are bad that we could give to each other, but this might be one of the best things that we can give to each other. And so the dialogue is consists of a speech in which Timaeus describes the creation of the universe and the creation of man, the creation of the universe. And pretty quickly on, he in this speech he says this is a likely story of the creation. No one really knows, obviously, Timaeus and Socrates. None of these speakers, Plato, no one was there when the universe was created. They have no, historical account of it. So they're going to do the best they can. And here at 29c, Timaeus says, "Don't be surprised, Socrates, if it turns out repeatedly that we won't be able to produce accounts on a great many subjects, on gods or the coming to be of the universe, that are completely and perfectly consistent and accurate. Instead, if we can come up with accounts no less likely than any, we ought to be content, keeping in mind that both I, the speaker, and you, the judges, are only human. So we should accept the likely tale on these matters. It behooves us not to look for anything beyond this." So the dialogue is in a way framed, this elaborate speech on the creation of man and the universe is framed with this discussion in the beginning that man can try to know things that are beyond him, but there's a limit to what man can know, and that he's on such levels of theorizing about the universe and man and nature that it would be foolish to look for perfect consistency and accuracy. But still, on the other hand, that doesn't mean we should just forget about these subjects and not think about them. In fact, Timaeus says we should try to do our best, humanly possible, to understand these things and accept the most likely tale, accept the account that seems most likely true or most likely good for another reason. It may not even be true. The tale that is being told of creation or the world or man and how man lives, all of this may not be true. It may be a likely tale, but it still may be promotive of human flourishing. And that's an important point that I'll come back to at the end of the remarks today. In the dialogue, we get a very complicated series of descriptions about what it is or how the world or the universe was created by the Creator, and then how man was created with different natures and different parts of his being. And the Creator, in the tale, Timaeus describes how the world was put together, all these different parts were put together as a unity, and how man was put together similarly out of these very different parts and formed into some unity. And four things that's come out, again, we're looking at these works here, if people are new to the blog, we're looking at these works for what they say about particular virtues. We're not trying to summarize or give an analysis of every word of the work. But four ideas principally come out in the Timaeus on human happiness, and or ideas that could be conducive, let's say, to human happiness. And those ideas come out within the nature, again, within this long speech of Timaeus about creation. And the first idea that comes out is that the world and the world that the Creator created is a fundamentally good world, but probably not in the ways we ordinarily think of the world as being good. But fundamentally, the world, when it was created beautifully and perfectly. Nature being part of it, was similarly created as fundamentally good and beautiful and kind and pure. Um, and why does Timaeus say or believe that? He starts out the creation myth by saying that there are two sorts of things in the world: things that are always the same, and things that change constantly. And he describes, and this is again Plato's idea of the forms that we talked about in one of the other posts. You can find this just by typing forms in the search box. Now the forms, as Plato described previously in many of his dialogues, are the conceptions of human virtues and conceptions of sort of the basic elements of human life that are always unchanging. They don't change over time. They are not touched by human beings. They are not understood through sense perception, but they are, for Plato, they were things that we understood. For example, the form of the good, the form of beauty, we understood through reason. Reason understood what the forms were. Reason understood as much as possible about the forms, tried to learn and describe the forms as much as possible. And once it did that, Plato thought the soul would find harmony and beauty and moderation throughout the course of a human life. That was pretty much Plato's belief, that only when the soul did that, when a human being used his understanding to understand what the good is, to understand what beauty is, to understand what love is, to understand what justice is, and understood these things again through the understanding, through reason, then all these good things can happen. Now, Plato said, Timaeus in the dialogue here, he very quickly says that there are these things, the forms, as we've talked about, and then there are things that again come and go. Everything else, basically, everything in the human existence, everything in the world that we can see as part of our sense perception, it changes, it comes and goes. It is born, it grows up, it flourishes, but then it decays and then it goes. Take a plant, people are like this, plants are like this, everything is like this, frankly. You see this across all forms of life. Things that are not forms, again, things that we don't understand strictly, ideas that we can understand strictly through the mind, things like basically everything we see and can know other than the forms come and be and change. So you think about, to give various examples, across all realms of life, this seems to be true. In politics, you have one political party that's flourishing, and then a couple years later, there's another one. Candidates come and go. A candidate, for example, like John Edwards, that was thought of as a wonderful politician, is now disgraced. He comes and goes. Political parties come and go. You had the Progressive Party in the U.S. that was very popular. They're done. Ross Perot had a party that that became rather popular. It's gone. So in all those, in politics that happens. It happens in sports. Teams that were very dominant before are no longer dominant. Dynasties come and go. Players come and go from a team. Entire leagues are disbanded. You had certain hockey leagues and soccer leagues that are being closed. They just can't draw fans. The economy certainly comes and goes. So the stock market goes up and down. Great institutions like Lehman Brothers and Dewey LaBeouf and other companies flourish and then become bankrupt. So they come and go. A worker that gains sort of a promotion and is heralded as some sort of wonderful worker, uprising star, he then quits, or he is fired, or whatever. So coming and going all over life. The everyday world that we all live in is filled with constant change. And I think the point Plato made was not all of that change was for the better. At the very least, change can either be better for someone or be worse, and often some change is for the worse. So that is the world of being and the world of becoming. But the forms, again, are not like this. The form of beauty, the form of the good, the form of love, the form of justice. These things Plato believed we could understand, and once we could understand them as best we humanly could, they would not change over the years. The conception, the form of justice that Plato knew would be in its essential points, not very different from the form that we would know today. Now, of course, over time, it would have to be applied in certain different ways. Different situations come about in life, but the actual principal form would stay always the same, and that is a central point in Plato's philosophy. Saying all that for the basic point that, again, to come back to one of the important things, points that are made here in the Timaeus, the world as it was made is a fundamentally good place, fundamentally beautiful and pure, the created world. And that is because Timaeus says the world was created based on the forms as patterns. The world was not created based on things that come and go, conceptions of things that come and go, but on the world that was created in the beginning of the universe was created under with the forms as a model, and therefore the world is fundamentally good, or was fundamentally good. And the key passage here I want to read, beautiful passage, at 29a. And Timaeus asks Socrates, I think, and so we must go back and raise this question about the universe. Which of the two models did the Maker use when he fashioned it? Was it the one that does not change and stays the same, or the one that has come to be? Well, if this world of ours is beautiful and its craftsman good, then clearly he looked at the eternal model. But if what it's blasphemous to even say is the case, then he looked at the one that has come to be. Now surely it's clear to all that it was the eternal model he looked at, for of all things that have come to be, our universe is the most beautiful, and of causes the craftsman is the most excellent. This then is how it has come to be. It is a work of craft, modeled after that which is changeless and grasped by a rational account, that is by wisdom. So the world was created after the forms, the pattern of the forms, which are eternal and timeless, changeless, and because of that, the world. And we know that because Timaeus says the universe is the most beautiful thing that there is. We live in a cosmos and a universe that's fundamentally beautiful, would be the argument, and therefore it could not have been based on things that come and go, that perish and decay, things that are not forms, but it had to be based on something that is always the same. And again, the question here is, well, if this world of ours is beautiful and its craftsman good, then clearly he looked at the eternal model. But if what's blasphemous to even say is the case, then he looked at the one that has come to be. Now it's clear to all that it was the eternal model he looked at. Where he says, but what if it's blasphemous to even say is the case? But where he says, but if what it's blasphemous to even say is the case, then he looked at one that has come to be. He's saying, if the world is not beautiful and the Creator is not good, then it would make sense that the world was created based on things that come and go. But he fundamentally thinks, Timaeus thinks fundamentally, that because the universe is beautiful and the craftsman is the most excellent, then the world was created based on things that are similarly excellent. And so that is the account that comes through of creation based on, again, the forms. Forms that are always constant. In 29c, he says, so accounts of what is stable and fixed and transparent to understand are themselves stable and unshifting. We must do our very best to make these accounts as irrefutable and invincible as any account may be. So the forms, again, stable and constant. The more we learn about these forms, the better. The more we learn about them, the more we learn that the whole created world, based on what Timaeus is saying here, was created in such a fashion. And all of that, I think, is important to human happiness. Appreciating that the world is fundamentally based on eternal, timeless, pure concepts is a way for man to recognize that he lives in a world that is fundamentally good. Granted, bad things can happen, but still, if that is an account of creation, then that makes sense that if that's true, then man can be a little bit more secure and content in living in such a world. The second idea that comes through in the Timaeus is that the human being has been fundamentally constructed in a beautiful way. Just as the cosmos was basically constructed beautifully by the Creator, human being has been fundamentally constructed in a beautiful way. And most of all, Plato thinks that's because we have been blessed with, again, human reason. We have been blessed with reason that he makes the point that it's the highest part of the human, it's the top part of our being, and reason is implanted in the soul of man, and that was done by, again, the Creator, who wanted us to know as much as we could, and wanted us to be as beautiful and as good as we could be. So reason was implanted in the soul of man, Timaeus says, so that we could be as good as possible. Here at 30b, the God wanted everything to be good and nothing to be bad, so far as that was possible. And so he took over all that was visible, not at rest, but in discordant and disorderly motion, and brought it from a state of disorder to one of order, because he believed that order was in every way better than disorder. Accordingly, the God reasoned and concluded that in the realm of things naturally visible, no unintelligent thing could as a whole be better than anything which does possess intelligence as a whole. And he further concluded that it is impossible for anything to possess intelligence apart from soul. Guided by this reasoning, he put intelligence in soul, and a soul in body, and so he constructed the universe. He wanted to produce a piece of work that would be as excellent and supreme as its nature would allow. This, then, in keeping with our likely account, is how we must say divine providence brought our world into being as a truly living thing, endowed with soul and intelligence. So again, Timaeus says, we don't know if any of these things are true, but it's likely that the Creator created humans with soul, with intelligence and soul, and he did this. He says the Creator wanted to produce a piece of work in man that was as excellent and supreme as its nature would allow. Man was not created to decline, but man was created by giving reason and intelligence and soul to become as excellent and supreme as human nature would allow. It's an important point. Again, there's certain limits of how far human beings can know things. There's certain limitations of being human, but beyond all that, we still have intelligence and a soul. We still have the ability to know as much as we can about what's good for us and what's good about the world that we live in, and that is how the Creator created man, according to Timaeus. Now, how does reason allow us, or how does intelligence in the soul allow us to be as excellent and supreme as our nature would allow? Well, at 90a, toward the end of the dialogue, we get a very moving passage here as to what reason can do, how we can permit man to be as stably happy as possible, as stably flourishing as possible. And it's at 90a, and I want to read this somewhat lengthy passage. But in it, Plato describes again what we can hope to gain from a life devoted to reason. And he says, So if a man has become absorbed in his appetites or his ambitions, and takes great pains to further them, all his thoughts are bound to become merely mortal. And so far as it is at all possible for a man to become thoroughly mortal, he cannot help but fully succeed in this, seeing that he has cultivated his mortality all along. On the other hand, if a man has seriously devoted himself to the love of learning and to true wisdom, if he has exercised those aspects of himself above all, then there is absolutely no way that his thoughts can fail to be immortal and divine should truth come within his grasp. And to the extent that human nature can partake of immortality, he can in no way fail to achieve this, constantly caring for his divine part as he does, keeping well ordered the guiding spirit that lives within him. He must indeed be supremely happy. Now, there is but one way to care for anything, and that is to provide for it the nourishment and emotions that are proper to it. And emotions that have an affinity to the divine part within us are the thoughts and revolutions of the universe. These surely are the ones which each of us should follow. We should redirect the revolutions in our heads that were thrown off course at our birth by coming to learn the harmonies and revolutions of the universe, and so bring into conformity with its objects our faculty of understanding, as it shall have achieved our goal, as it was in its original condition. And when this conformity is complete, we shall have achieved our goal, that most excellent life ordered to humankind by the gods, both now and forevermore. So reason here is again described by Plato as someone that devotes himself seriously to it, will be able to again partake in as much divine-like thought, immortality, and basically as a supremely happy existence as is possible for a human. If instead, Plato says, we are absorbed in appetites or ambitions, and we take, he says, great pains to further them. We suffer a lot to further our appetites or ambitions. We neglect reason, and we neglect the love of wisdom, the love of learning. We let those things fall aside. Then we won't partake in that, because we are focusing all our appetite, all our energies on these other things. If wherever we focus on, that's what we're going to become. We're not going to become something or achieve something if we don't focus in that direction. If our focus is on those the necessary aspects of human existence, then we will strictly achieve that level of happiness, whatever it is. But if our focus is on the love of wisdom, the love of learning, Plato seems to think, and says here that that man will be supremely happy. He will be as immortal as can be, is basically the Platonic formula here. And so again, that is sort of another thought that comes through from the Timaeus about what sort of happiness is possible. It's a very intellectual account, but it's not elitist, I don't think. It's not. The love of learning and the love of wisdom, I think, can be pursued by anyone. It's not limited to a few people. Anyone can read Plato, can read Aristotle, can read many other philosophers, many other writers, many other thinkers, and I don't think it's limited to a few people. But it must be, I think, for Plato, it was here obviously something that man would have to seriously devote himself to, not just partake once in a while, but really devote himself to learning, and learning again for Plato, as we described earlier on in the dialogue, is about it's about knowledge, and knowledge in the soul, and knowledge that came about from understanding, from the rational part, not from sense perception, not from anecdotes, not from common sayings, not from aphorisms, not from proverbs, but from some sort of reasoned account of the good, reasoned account that stayed in the soul, that man worked for very diligently, personally, to learn and know. That was for him the way to attain this level of wisdom and supreme happiness in his view. Beyond that, Plato and the Timaeus, the speaker, he makes again certain points again about happiness residing in some sort of moderation or balancing, some sort of harmonization of what is necessary in life and what is best in life. Aristotle in the Ethics, Book 10, talked about that. We blogged on that, but it comes through again in the Timaeus. There is, of course, things that are necessary to be human, our needs and desires, and things that are just necessary for any kind of human life as it's presently structured. From the mundane, if you want to drive, you need to get an oil change. To continue existing as a human, you need to eat. To continue, if you own a home, you have to take care that certain bills are paid. These are all necessary aspects of human existence. But Plato says that the necessary is done for the best, and that is one of his ideas of happiness, or the sort of supreme happiness, is doing the necessary for the sake of the best, not limiting yourself to the necessary, but always doing the necessary for the best, even taking care of the body, various things you have to do to keep in shape and to keep well groomed. All of those are necessary things to exercise, to remain attractive. All of those things necessary, not the best activities for a human. Plato thought comes out in the Timaeus. Two passages here are at 69a. Where Timaeus says, we must distinguish two forms of cause, the divine and the necessary. First, the divine, for which we must search in all things if we are to gain a level of happiness to the extent that our nature allows. And second, the necessary, for which we must search for the sake of the divine. Our reason is that without the necessary, those other objects about which we are serious cannot on their own be discerned, and hence cannot be comprehended or partaken of in any other way. That's one passage. Another passage is at 75e. Our Maker, and he talks again about the creation of man. Our Maker has fitted the mouth, the human mouth, out with teeth, a tongue, and lips in their current arrangement to accommodate both what is necessary and what is best. They designed the mouth as the entry passage for what is necessary and as the exit for what is best. For all that comes in and provides nourishment for the body is necessary, while that stream of speech that flows out through the mouth, that instrument of intelligence, is the fairest and best of all streams. Let me read that passage again. It's a great formulation, I think, of Plato's views on the necessary and the best. Our Maker has fitted the mouth out with teeth, a tongue and lips in their current arrangement, to accommodate both what is necessary and what is best. They designed the mouth as the entry passage for what is necessary, and as the exit for what is best. For all that comes in and provides nourishment for the body is necessary, while that stream of speech that flows out through the mouth, that instrument of intelligence, is the fairest and best of all streams. That is perhaps, again, another formulation of the ranking of the different aspects of man's life that Plato thought was significant. The mouth takes in things. We need to eat. We need air to breathe. And these are basic needs. And so our mouth is able to take in what is necessary. On the other hand, he thought that the stream of speech, sort of a reasoned discourse, a sort of a speech that is an instrument of intelligence, true wisdom, not false opinions, or again, not argument or anger or yelling at each other, or sort of passionate dialogue. But that stream of speech again that flows out wisdom, streams out wisdom and intelligence, is, he thought, the fairest and best thing for a human being to engage in that activity, to literally flow out of his mouth words and arguments and thoughts that are supremely fair, supremely beautiful, supremely best. That was, again, his view of a way to attain some level of happiness, a lasting happiness. Another thought that comes through, and this is probably the fourth thought, is it comes out toward the end of the Timaeus, is that there has to be a balance between the soul and learning, and also, again, this might be related to the necessary, but the care of the body. The body cannot be neglected. Timaeus says here, from both of these conditions, there is in fact one way to preserve oneself, and that is not to exercise the soul without exercising the body, nor the body without the soul, so that each man may be balanced by the other, and so be sound. So we can't just totally devote ourselves to the soul, to reason, to understanding, to wisdom, while neglecting the body. Both have to be cared for, both have to be exercised, both have to be cultivated, both have to be nurtured, both have to be worked on. But clearly, as we saw though, Plato did always think that the soul and what was best for the soul was what should be most focused on. Now, these ideas, again, on not dissimilar from some of Aristotle's ideas on human happiness, frankly. I think in the Timaeus, you see, there's a lot of parallels with what we saw in Aristotle in the Ethics, when he talked about reason and the contemplative life and contemplative speculation being the best form of life, but of course, it's the best form of life for man. And as Aristotle repeatedly stated in the Ethics, in the Nicomachean Ethics, man has many needs. Man has needs that cannot be taken care of through contemplation. And I think Aristotle said man needs tendance of all kinds. There's all these sorts of things that man needs for his life to go well. All these sorts of desires and needs, they cannot be ignored. But still, Aristotle in the Ethics located supreme human happiness as being residing in contemplative speculation. And so these ideas are not very different here. What are we to make of some of these ideas presented in the Timaeus about human happiness? Is this a universal recipe for everyone? Is these ideas ones that everyone could apply in their life? And is this a utopian view, or is this something that's not reachable or attainable by most people? I'll try to give my impressions here. First, the ideas about the universe being fundamentally good and beautiful and being created based on the forms. Who knows whether that's true or not? But it's hard to deny once we look at the world, beautiful plants in the summer, the symmetry of the seasons, all of the wonderful sights and sounds that surround us. It's hard to believe that, it's hard not to be somewhat moved that this is a fundamentally good world, and that it was created in its essential outlines based on not things that come and go and that perish, but based on sort of more lasting, eternal forms. The beauty of a beautiful mountain or a beautiful stream, there seems to be something about that would always be beautiful, and that was modeled after something that was always beautiful. And knowing that and regarding the world in that way, I think, is an important contributor to happiness. It's important for a human being, I think, to think that he's living in a world that is fundamentally been created based on eternal, timeless, and good things in a good spirit. That is an important way to view the world. Contrast that with the world, the blasphemy notion that I think Timaeus brought out, where he didn't even want to he didn't want to air the thought. He said, "What if?" He asked in the beginning. Now, surely, he said, which of the two models did the maker use when he fashioned it? Was it the one that does not change and stays the same, or the one that has come to be? And then he says, but if what it's blasphemous to even say is the case, then he looked at one that has come to be. Again, if the world is created, if the world is not fundamentally good and beautiful, then it was not created based on things that were like the forms fundamentally good and beautiful. And so that does make sense that it would be happier for us to regard the world. It would be better for us, more pleasing to regard the world as being built on those kinds of things rather than the opposite. So that, I think, is an idea that's not too utopian to accept, even if it's hard to ultimately, again, prove whether it's true or not, as with all the ideas here in the Timaeus. Again, we're dealing with what Timaeus says are likely tales about human nature and human creation. But beyond that, the ideas about the human soul, perfecting the rational side of our soul as much as humanly possible, that being the recipe for supreme human happiness, that is, we have to think about, is that utopian? Again, Plato is not saying here that these that we should not take care of our body, we should not exercise. He in fact says it's important to take care of the body and the soul together. We shouldn't enjoy various pleasures that are necessary. He talks about all the necessary things we have to do. But he's really talking about balancing, again, what is best in life with what is necessary. And so I don't think in that sense the ideas are utopian. In another sense, is it utopian to say that we should pursue wisdom as much as possible? That hardly seems utopian to me to say that we should cultivate as much as we can our rational, our soul and our reason. Do that. It took me 3 hours or 4 hours to read the Timaeus. It's 70, 80 pages. I don't think it's utopian to say people can engage in these ideas and work through these ideas. I really don't. I don't think that's a fair assessment of the situation. I think many people can read Plato's dialogues, and there's much wisdom in there, and there's many, even without reading the dialogues, there's many activities people can engage in that really focuses them in on wisdom and learning as much as they can about themselves and the world. There's various shows now, and you can go on YouTube and pull up a lot of different talks. It hardly seems utopian to me to say that recipe for the perfection of human happiness is utopian. So I wouldn't say it's utopian at all. And I guess the last point is to make about these ideas is think about all of the other approaches we've all tried in our lives, different things we've tried to gain some sort of stable, lasting happiness, and how often it's been unsuccessful. As you look at your life or people you know, you can honestly assess whether they have found any sort of stable happiness, or as much as is possible for a human, and see if it's not worth the effort to try something like what Plato's talking about here, in terms of cultivating the soul and cultivating intelligence within the soul through sort of an earnest pursuit of wisdom, or an earnest love of wisdom. It's admittedly, again, hard to prove. It's true that there is a best life for everyone, and it resides in a life committed to human reason. That's a hard thing to prove. But again, I've hardly ever heard of a better account that it seems better than what we talked about here in the Timaeus. Plato's creation account is he even says it's a likely story. It involves invisible forms, the intentions of a creator God that no one was around to experience. He has a complicated psychology of human nature and what is better and worse for human beings. a lot of these ideas seem so strange from a modern perspective. But again, none of that means that what Plato says is not true. And even beyond that, even if it's not true in a sort of scientific sense, those ideas could still be promotive of the human good and human happiness. If you think of a lot of things that produce happiness in people's lives, for example, a beautiful song, a beautiful view, love, friendship. Hard to say these things are true or false. They are neither true nor false often, but they do have an undeniable effect on human happiness. And so, it may be interesting to think about Plato's ideas, or ideas about the soul and reason being promoting the best form of life. It may be interesting to think of these ideas as being good for us, even if we can't necessarily prove that they're true, but we can only prove perhaps that they're the most likely things to be true. Is there an account of human happiness that we've heard from another source that seems to be more promotive, that seems to be more true? Is there a recipe for happiness, if we're not going to accept Plato's, that seems more consistent with truth and with our own experience? That's sort of the question I think that Plato challenges us with. He's not saying in the Timaeus that these ideas of reason and the soul and happiness and the blessed good life for the creation of the world are ones he can prove unassailably. But I think he's trying to suggest that in the end, even if he can't prove many of those assertions in the Timaeus about what is supremely good for man, what is supremely likely to create human beauty, human happiness, human contentment, that they still may be the best recipe for human contentment, even if you can't prove they're true. And in the end, the reader is left with that. The reader is left sort of with a feeling that the life that Plato describes in the Timaeus, committed to reason, committed to the perfection of the soul, is indeed a grand and a beautiful and a lovely life, even if he can't necessarily prove that everything in the Timaeus is true. And so while ironically, Plato praises reason repetitively, undeniably, and rhetorically, grandly, praises reason as the seat of human happiness and flourishing. In the end, not sure he's rationally proved that, which is probably the most fascinating thing about so much of Plato's dialogues. The lover of wisdom and his most supreme ideas of what is good for man, and he can in the end only say that his ideas are a likely story. But that being said, it's ironic that the philosopher that praises reason so incessantly is perhaps most effective in advancing his ideas on human reason by the feeling that he ultimately leaves, the feeling in the soul that he leaves the reader with, that is somewhat based on reason, but always has some non-rational element to it, some beauty, some goodness that just cannot be proven true or good, true or false, in the sort of way that we expect things to be proven true or false. So because of that, his view of human happiness is one that is perhaps much more emotive than and emotional and passion-driven than I think he would want us to think. So with that, we'll end for today. Thank you.